Hello and welcome to On the Way Moments, the award-winning podcast from St. Anthony on the Desert Episcopal Church here in beautiful Arizona. I'm Will Strong and I'm your host today. And on today's episode, we're happy to have back our first return guest, Catherine Gilbert. Catherine serves as the director of Walking the Mourners Path, which is a national grief ministry that is based here out of St. Anthony. So welcome back, Catherine.
It's good to be back, Will. Thank you.
It's fun to have you. So we kind of have been talking about where we wanted to go, and with the holidays coming up, we thought what a way to talk maybe about grief during the holidays. And so we hope that you would be able to give us some ideas of how to approach the holidays, you know, when either we're personally grieving or maybe grieving from somebody else, for something else too. So,
Okay, so there's a couple layers there.
Yeah, absolutely.
The first one is, you're personally grieving. And I think generally we can just talk about the expectation over holidays is so great to have that perfect holiday. And so for all of us, we are all burdened by that. And I think there's this anticipation this year with the holidays is that we can somewhat get together now and we can somewhat have those celebrations that we've put on hold. And so there's another expectation. And then there's the whole vax or anti-vax and, that all layers into it. And so what you have to do when you're in that situation where you're like, the holidays are really something I'm not prepared for, I'm missing someone, is kind of take away all that noise, first of all.
Okay.
Yeah, just take away that noise and the expectations that this is going to be the perfect holiday for Thanksgiving. Everybody's going to be wonderful, because that's not even a reality.
I was going to say, even in pre-pandemic, and I
was reading a really interesting article about grief and the holidays, and what was first interesting is there's not a lot written about it, because people don't talk about dying and missing someone at Christmas, because we're all supposed to be happy and singing White Christmas, right? But one of the suggestions they had is do what you want to do. What works for you? So, for instance, if you really love Thanksgiving and Thanksgiving dinner, force yourself into Thanksgiving dinner. Go and take that risk. And you can always say, I need to leave early too if it doesn't work out. Or if you want to do Christmas, but you want to do it on a smaller scale, or just be by yourself, if that works for you, then do what works for you in that holiday. Just remember that this is going to be different.
Absolutely.
It's going to feel different. There's going to be a different, because that person is missing. You're hurting, and so what's going to feel good to me? From a Christian perspective, I think you really need to make space for time with God.
Absolutely.
And we are fortunate here at St. Anthony. We have a beautiful labyrinth.
Right.
And that's a really good way to make a connection with God. Go out and walk, find a way that you can really connect with God through prayer, through quiet time, to getting yourself away from kind of the hustle and bustle that's so prevalent during the holidays, and find a place where you can sit with God and say, God, I need help.
Absolutely.
Because God will provide. He will provide you those moments that you will find that God's there with you. All you have to do is be aware of it. And you can't be aware of it if you're worrying about what's on your Christmas list and what's not in the store.
What I got to get done.
Yeah. So find a way to find a spiritual practice.
Yeah.
And I think one of the great things about Advent is being intentional during the season of Advent. And Advent starts right after Thanksgiving. Is find a spiritual practice that you can take on for the season of Advent, and a way of honoring your spiritual life. And journaling is a really good example, really good thing to do, is journal like, I'm missing, how can I help me, God, through this? Or for me, a spiritual practice is hiking, because I like to be outdoors. And so I will take a very intentional hike, not with my music or news or whatever, but just really being in the moment and present with God. The other thing I think is really one of the exercises we do in Mourners Path is that, so you've always done something with the person that died. Try doing it. See if you can do it, how it feels. But if it's too much for you, find something to replace it.
Yeah.
So for instance, if you always went to a certain restaurant for dinner or whatever, try going there. Or maybe do something else. Well, I can't do that. There's too many painful memories. Let's try something else. Try a different place to go. Try a different tradition that you haven't done. That's a great thing about electronic age is we can Google something and say, something I can do that I can do on my own. Another thing is give of yourself. Find a way to be involved in the real Christian movement. For instance, helping out at a food bank or making it if you're good at handiwork or just doing something that puts yourself outside of yourself and outside of your grief for a moment.
That's great. I like that.
Yeah, just find
being intentional about finding something. I think that's the word intentional, because it's very easy for us to just get on our list and boom, 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 or even go out for our hike and this is what I'm going to do today, and then all of a sudden you're like, no, I'm going to actually be intentional about spending time with God.
Right.
And that's when that healing and that can take place. So
now the second part of your question was, what can we do for others that we know? Over and over I hear this, even not around the holidays. It's so often that people who've experienced the death of a child or a spouse, they're not invited anymore. Because if it's a group of couples that always got together for a special holiday meal, maybe she'll feel sad because
we don't want to upset
her. No, invite them. Invite someone that is normally had been in your circle. If their circumstances change, you have to be more. And again, the word intentional comes up, making sure that they are invited to the things. And then don't suppose that when you're sitting there and that you know how that person is feeling. Because everybody grieves in their own way, because every relationship is unique with the person that's died. So just because you would have felt some way doesn't mean that they're feeling that same way. And there's different phases of grief. We have to understand that. There's that immediacy, there's that center stage where you're trying to get everything going, and then there's the reconciliation phase. And you don't know where that person's going to be in that process of grief. So spend some time, just be intentional about including them if they had been included. Or if you know someone that's maybe new to your community or had experience, find a way to include them in your activities is a great gift to give someone.
Invite them into.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
And, the other thing is sometimes parents who lose children, teenagers, there's this, it's hard for them to be around other parents, certainly, but it doesn't mean they don't want to be.
Right.
They still want to be included. They had a relationship with your children too.
Right.
Their children had their child had a relationship with your child, and they had a relationship with your children too. And so include them too. Just be conscious of the fact that they might say no.
Right.
But that's okay.
And that's okay.
And give them space. The other thing is, and Jill reminded me of this, is don't they say things like, oh, they're in such a better place now up with Jesus,
Oh, man.
Because that can be really hard because people struggle with what faith means when they're grieving.
Absolutely.
Because they know in their hearts and in their heads that their faith life tells them that they're with God, but they miss them.
Of course.
And so they're not going to be like, or if they've they're no longer suffering.
Right.
Because, they know that.
Right.
But they're still missing that person. And it's only amplified at Thanksgiving and at Christmas because there's all this, everybody's supposed to be cheery kind of thing. Yeah.
Right. And I've heard of services where it's like blue services and we did one at one of the churches I worked on. It was just a time to be together and to just mourn. And it was actually quite a beautiful service because it was, and so, maybe you find something like that or,
One of the things we do here at St. Anthony is we do it throughout the season of Advent. It's the theology of peanuts, which is my favorite. And it's Charlie Brown, and he's saying, maybe there are not stars in the sky, but loved ones looking down on us. And I love that because it continues the relationship with the person that died. And so at St. Anthony, we do stars, and we allow people to write the name of the person that's died. It doesn't matter how long ago it was or anything. And we used to put it on a tree. Now we put it over the double doors at church. Nice. And it's really pretty because as you enter in, your loved one is looking down at you. And it's really cool. And it's a way of engaging not just yourself, but one of the things we've learned through the process of grief is we don't learn to grieve as a child. We're separated from it. But here's an opportunity for a child to say, well, I can write grandma's name on here. And a way for them to express themselves and the fact that they too are experiencing the loss too, they too are missing that person that used to, make cookies with them
neat.
or whatever.
And what a tangible way then, leaving, 6 months down the road, you look up and there's a star and you're you feel that peace of, I like that. That's really a neat thing. There was actually just a CBS Sunday Morning article yesterday that we watched was about this gentleman he was a photographer, and he posted this old rotary phone. This was in Olympia, Washington, at the end of this trail, and an idea was just to post it there, and people would come out and they would dial just a number, and then they would actually talk to the person that has passed. And it was just this incredible story about people who were still grieving and people who maybe hadn't grieved, and they were just sharing their we miss you, we love you type thing. And it was just this incredible story of something so that seems so small to me, but somebody who's lost somebody can just go and be present.
Well, it's the opportunity to tell your story.
Absolutely.
And that's another thing we can do at the holidays is spend time to talk about those stories. We said the last time I was here, storytelling is how we heal from our grief.
Absolutely.
And so giving space for those storytelling. And often they are the funniest stories that come out. You remember when they did it?
Exactly.
And that way there'll be tears and laughter all at the same time. And that's to me is what Christmas is about.
Absolutely. I was just going to say,
those connections.
What a joyous time.
Yeah.
Really, to remember and to share stories with the families. Yeah. And a step towards healing and reconciliation. Yeah.
Yeah.
So you kind of mentioned something, don't say this. Is there any other, that you'd say not to do during the holidays?
Just those expectations. Don't do anything because somebody else wants you to do it. I hear that a lot. Well, my daughter wants me to do this. I hear that a lot from widows in particular, that all of a sudden they're, don't know how to use their life or anything. Certainly if you see something that's dangerous with somebody who needs extra special help, but you really don't put your expectations onto somebody else. Yeah. I mean, that's good advice regardless.
In life, right? Yes.
And just allow the space for them to be who they are. And if they say they don't want to come to something, don't force the issue.
Right.
It's so-and-so's going to really,
Right.
Just be gentle.
We don't want to guilt them into
Right.
You need to be here because,
But if there is a case where people are isolating, that's not healthy either.
Absolutely, yeah.
It's not healthy either. And finding a place for them to help as we've talked about before, a mental health professional, a priest. These are all giving space for all that. Because, I always say that if you're not feeling well, you can take your temperature of your body temperature. So take a mental and spiritual temperature of where you are in your grieving.
I like that. Absolutely. That's cool. I'm going to use that. Mental temperature. Yeah, I think that's a great point. So I know we kind of talked about this, but are there any other suggestions for people? Maybe they're dreading the holidays.
Well, I think a lot of people dread the holidays.
I was going to say even not in grief right now, right? Especially now with the shortage and everything else, it's is everything on back order, or and so
tip your toe in. Tip your toe into it. If you're really dreading it, tip your toe in. To pick something that isn't going to be too overwhelming, and just tip your toe in it and see where it goes. It will be a step in your healing. Is putting your foot forward, taking that step.
Nice.
And a faith step. Yeah. Take a step of faith and do it in a place where you feel safe.
Absolutely.
That you're not going to, or anonymous.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a good point. I think, just, do something that's going to, especially like you said, during Advent, which was the whole season of waiting.
Right.
Let's enjoy the moment we have and try to work towards some things and towards that healing. Absolutely. Right. Anything else you'd like to share? This is great.
We just move on right through this.
I'm sorry, grief isn't it's great, but I think the advice you gave is really great.
Thank you. Well, I think we have to recognize that grief is a natural process, and it comes from loving.
Absolutely.
It comes from a place of loving. And so grief is natural. And don't pretend like it's not there, because it's going to come up and it's going to get you in another way.
Right.
You know, and it might exhibit itself in another way, but take the time
Yep.
and acknowledge it.
Absolutely. So, Catherine, how can people find out about Walking the Mourner's Path?
Walking the Mourners Path is a national ministry, and they can go to our website,
Perfect.
www.mournerspath.com. I had to think of how many
Other
W's
W's
are there.
yeah.
And my email address is on the website, and you'll learn about the programs, and I can try to connect you with a church that offers the program or a way to. And the other piece of this, if you're feeling called to sit with grieving people in a ministry of presence, we're beginning to have Mourners Path facilitator training schools.
That's exciting.
And so, again, because COVID is slowly abating, and we're starting to be able to do the training, and maybe it's a place that you can, if you are one of those people that have a heart for pastoral care and for listening and being present, you don't really need a lot of special skills. You just need to have a heart and be willing to, an empathetic heart.
Perfect. We'll include that. Your information in the show notes below. But I think that's it for today. If you liked our episode, please give us a thumbs up, leave a comment. We're on all the platforms that you can think of. Until next time, be on the lookout for those on the way moments that God is showing up in your life. Goodbye for now.
Bye.